terms of their currency. Okay, so meaning buying power varied tremendously by state, meaning the bigger states were, losing out to, some of the smaller states in the sense of what the buying power was. And the biggest loser in that equation are the banks. Okay, so during this period, banks were losing a lot of money because of, again, how, this purchasing power, varied tremendously by state. They didn't know how to, basically format how much it was worth. And again, banks were losing out on a lot of money. Okay, so what happened was banks just said, you know what, we're just not going to lend out any more money. Okay, we can't because, again, these different monetary systems from all these 13 different colonies, are making us the biggest loser because, again, we don't know what these varying purchasing powers are. So banks decide, you know what, we're just not going to lend out any more money. Okay. So if you guys know anything about farmers, okay, and again, we're here right in the, the hotbed of agriculture, so everybody knows one farmer or another. Oftentimes you work off of debt, meaning you don't get paid for a certain crop, till a year down the line, maybe 18 months, because it has to go through, the whole process of manufacturing, distribution, your product has to go to market, all of these different things that have to happen before a farmer gets paid. Same thing happened, back in the day. This was the same way with Daniel Shays. So Daniel Shays was a farmer. So when banks decide to not lend out any more money, farmers can't pay their bills. Oftentimes they go under. So when this happened, Daniel Shays, he lost his land, okay? And during this time period, okay, the idea was that it was the first people to truly be enfranchised in this country were white men with property, okay? So when Daniel Shays lost his property, okay, he lost his ability to be enfranchised, to have power in this country. So again, he and his mob of farmers that have been, screwed over as well, the ones that again rely on debt, they decide to commandeer and seize courthouses, in the colonies. Okay, so during this time period, they disrupt the trial of debtors. So feeling like, they cannot, take any more land away from people if, disrupting these trial of debtors. Right? So eventually, Daniel Shays' rebellion was put down, but it did spur the nation's leaders to action. So what was that action? So again, Articles of Confederation provided that weak first constitution, where again it was going to be replaced during the Constitutional Convention. So what do I mean by the Constitutional Convention? It took place September 11th, 1786. So this was going to talk about how the framers were looking to construct what the Constitution was going to say. Okay, so what were the main themes, the ideas that come out of the Constitutional Convention are very much what our Constitution consists of. Okay, so again, this is that framing process. The Founding Fathers are framing what the dialogue in the Constitution is going to look like. So this takes place in a meeting in states in Annapolis, Maryland. So important issues to solve. Okay, so this included the relationship between the states and the central government, because again, that confederation was not working. States having ultimate authority was not working. So they needed some sort of central authority that can be agreed on. Right? So the powers of the national legislature, the need for an executive leadership, and the establishment of policies for economic stability. Because again, the economic turmoil is what led to, people losing their land, when banks no longer, loan out money. So it called for a constitutional convention, May 14th, 1787. Many strong delegates were nationalists, strong nationalists. Ben Franklin, George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, Hamilton, very, very strong Federalists. Okay, so they were considered Federalists. They wrote what was referred to as the Federalist Papers, which I'll speak to here in a few slides. So you had the ideas behind small states and large states. So I kind of alluded to it earlier in the sense that, again, larger states, their industries oftentimes were bigger than the smaller states because, again, their size, population, and so forth. So you had that dichotomy that existed during this time period. You had smaller states and you had large states. Okay, so during this constitutional framing process, you had the small states, not want to be told what to do by the larger states. That was their fear. So you had two plans that existed between the small states and large states. So the large states favored what was referred to as the Virginia Plan. Okay, so the Virginia Plan, this was constructed by James Madison, Edmund Rudolph. What it called for and how it favored larger states was it would call for an elected legislator and national judiciary, but it called for a bicameral legislature. So where the Articles of Confederation had a unicameral legislature, which was only one, this called for a bicameral legislature, which would have two chambers that would make Congress, what it is today. The lawmaking body of our government. So in this Virginia Plan as well, you had the number of representatives would be consistent with how big or how many people were in a state. Okay? So again, this was that proverbial ace in the sleeve for the larger states, saying it should be determined by the state's population. Bigger states should have a bigger say in how the government operates. Right? So this would favor large states. Smaller states knew this. Okay, so they knew the battle plan of the larger states, and they were very fearful of that. So they knew the larger ones would be able to form a majority in the national legislature, and they didn't want that because, again, they didn't feel that, again, that local authority would be able to express itself. So the New Jersey Plan. So the New Jersey Plan is what the smaller states brought together to kind of rebuttal the Virginia Plan as it existed for the larger states. Okay, so what did the New Jersey Plan say? It was written by William Patterson. It called for a simple amendment to the Articles of Confederation saying one state should have one vote. Okay, so the idea was that to mitigate the advantage that larger states had, they wanted to have, this idea based on equality. It should be one state, one vote. Right? So one notable feature of the New Jersey Plan was the reference to the supremacy doctrine. Okay, so later in the Constitution, the idea that the smaller states, knowing that they were smaller, they knew that they had to have some sort of national authority at some point to kind of speak for the larger interests. So it wasn't necessarily giving up their framing on local authority, but they knew something had to be understood in that way. Doctrine. This is saying that national law is always superior to state law. Okay, so again, this is a doctrine, the priority that national law and specifically the Congress will always be superior to any conflicting state or local laws. So this was a principle that was asserted specifically when the founders are framing the Constitution. This is an article, when you're talking about Article 6, this is specifically where the notion behind what the supremacy doctrine is exists. So again, how eventually there is that authority at the national level, that all of these smaller states agree to. So what is the Great Compromise? Specifically bringing to light what the Virginia Plan and the New Jersey Plan called for. Okay, so it called for a bicameral legislature, one that would be based off of equality, which is our Senate. Every state gets 2 senators, and another chamber based off of population. Okay, so that chamber would favor larger states. So again, you have this compromise that exists between the Virginia and New Jersey plans. Okay, so it's called the Great Compromise, sometimes referred to as the Connecticut Compromise. So there was a huge issue that still needed to be adjusted. Okay, so the institution of slavery. Okay, so as wise and noble as the founding fathers were, we have to talk about that historical black eye. The idea behind not having enough gold during this time period to question the institution of slavery. So during this time period, the ideas behind the institution of slavery are written into our Constitution, okay, specifically in the 3/5 Compromise. Okay, so 3/5 Compromise, this dealt with the representational scheme of how slaves would be counted as 3/5 of a person. And again, that's that historical idea behind, our founding fathers were wise. But again, when we look in retrospect in the sense of how, the institution wasn't called into question more, I feel that James Madison really sums it up in terms of how, the ideas behind why the Constitution was written the way it was. Obviously, we know that the institution of slavery is wrong and will always be wrong. But this was James Madison's basically explaining rationale. Okay, so he stated, "Great as the evil is," meaning the institution of slavery, "a dismemberment of the Union would be even worse." Okay, so again, that was the kind of thought process behind why, slavery as an institution was allowed in the Constitution. And again, looking at it from historically, seeing where, again, in our Constitution, it justifies slavery, specifically with the 3/5 Compromise. Again, the institution of slavery, being fought during the Civil War, which we're going to refer to back here in a couple slides. But again, the idea that slavery wasn't called into question. And again, there were founding fathers that wanted to, but again, they had that same rationale that Madison had. So other issues included no import tax, because again, taxes were one of those things that were very frowned upon, because of why the Revolutionary War was fought in the first place. It mandated Supreme Court, and Congress established lower courts. Okay, so again, this national courts versus the state and local courts, and it, referring to how the minutia of the Constitution was then written. Once the Great Compromise was written, the specifics and the details were a makeup of the national and judiciary branch. Okay, they were left unsettled to a 5-man committee of detail. Okay, so again, it's hard enough to get 13 people to agree to anything, let alone 13 colonies with different industries that fuel them, different religious backgrounds that make up their borders. So again, all of these different, the nature of how the Constitution, the specificity was then put into this committee of detail. It's 5-man committee of detail. So separation of powers, very much a notion of Montesquieu. Okay, so another philosopher, another rock star of the day, his notion of separation of powers, this was a principle of dividing governmental powers among different branches of government. Okay, so James Madison utilized Montesquieu's idea of separation of powers to create what is now referred to as the Madisonian model. So what is the Madisonian model? It is powers of the national government are separated into three branches. So our three branches of government, a specific rule of thumb, your legislative branch writes your laws, your executive branch enforces your laws, and your judicial branch interprets your laws. Okay, so again, those are the specific notions behind what those branches do. Okay? So the notion behind separation of powers was this idea of checks and balances. Okay, so the idea was that no power in the federal or national government should have more power than the others. Okay, so checks and balances is kind of what can be referred to as kind of a governmental Rochambeau. The branches have the ability to check the actions of the other two by way of, again, this checks and balances. So again, to avoid any power being vested too much in any one direction, the other two branches would have the ability to check the powers of the other two. Okay? So again, this confrontation of powers, responsibilities, it's there in the book specifically as to how the branches can check the other two. So ratification process, like I said, very difficult because, again, very difficult to get 13 people to agree to anything. Like I said, let alone 13 different colonies with all, again, coming with different religious backgrounds, industries that fuel them, identities. So again, very difficult process. So specifically, it was set up specifically as popular sovereignty. How states would then get to put their feelings forward as to how, the idea behind limited government with written laws, limiting government's actions on the people or the state, separation of powers with checks and balances. Again, all of these notions that are, again, going to be agreed on in this ratification process. So it's a difficult road, okay, this difficult road to ratification. Because, like I said, you had some individuals that really felt that a national government could then overnight, become a heavy-handed monarchy, which they just fought a revolutionary war against. And so, again, people were still very fearful that a national government could usurp power just the way the king King George III usurped the power in Britain. So again, you had these two camps that again came to light during this period. Okay, so once the threshold of 9 of the 13 colonies agreed to the Constitution, it would start taking effect and begin to organize. So what were the first two political parties that make up our governmental understandings? Okay, so you had the Federalists and the Anti-Federalists. Okay, so alluding to earlier, again, the Federalists, they wrote the Federalist Papers. Okay, the Federalist Papers were a series of 85 essays that specifically spoke to defending having a strong central government that could help alleviate some of these problems that existed in the Articles of Confederation. Okay, so these defense, in defense of a national central government, James Madison, John Jay, were putting together these essays in defense of a strong national. Question? No? So Anti-Federalists, on the other hand, were very much on the opposite end. Okay, so Anti-Federalists opposed ratification of the new Constitution because they opposed a strong central government. Okay? So they were very much influenced by Montesquieu at the time, feeling that democracy in small districts, local politics is very much where you want to, put your emphasis towards. Okay? So they kind of very much leaned on that, the idea of, not wanting to put too much restriction on local authority. Patrick Henry was also a very anti-federalist. Samuel Adams also felt the same way. They felt the Constitution was written by aristocrats. Okay? So they felt that John Jay, James Madison were of means. Okay? They felt that they would usurp power for themselves, and it would lead to tyranny. And they wanted to include a list of guarantees. Okay? So again, in order to avoid this notion of being subject to a strong central government, they wanted to find something that would guarantee them that course of action wouldn't happen. So again, they wanted these guarantees, and these guarantees became our Bill of Rights. Okay, so our Bill of Rights say, again, our freedom of speech, freedom of religion, freedom of assembly, freedom of the press. That was, our guarantee in Amendment 1. Okay, in our Second Amendment, the right to bear arms, that is another guarantee. Again, these were being infringed on when a heavy-handed King George III was mandating, let's say in the Third Amendment, that having soldiers quartered in homes. So again, the Third Amendment is saying that can never happen again, because now it is in these list of guarantees. The right to a speedy trial, the right to self-incrimination, all of these again speak to the instance in which, again, the Crown was not allowing these freedoms to exist. Okay? So again, these list of guarantees are very, very historically significant in the sense of how the colonists were being restricted in these times that felt that, again, these guarantees reflected that fear that, again, didn't want to repeat itself with a strong central government, turning into a strong monarchy. Okay? So Madison drafted these rights, and they became our first 10 amendments. So again, those first 10 amendments, our Bill of Rights specifically, again, if you're having monarchy problems, I feel bad for you, son. I got 99 problems, but a king ain't one. Okay? So again, that's that, feeling behind, how these memes kind of make sense, with regards to, again, why the colonists, were fearful in the way of repeating history. They didn't like monarchy, and again, they were writing a constitution that prevented that monarchy from existing or rearing itself. Right? All right. So again, what if I told you they don't teach your rights in school at least as much as they should, because it's easier to take them away if you don't know what they are. Okay? So again, understand that we are all given these Bill of Rights. If we're citizens, again, we are given these rights to exist, that again protect us, from infringement of a strong central government. So again, they were written in a way that's very much, again, like I said, historically significant. The things that were being experienced during this period of time were, again, the rights that were written up the way they were, which became our Bill of Rights. Because again, the intolerable and coercive acts allowed the detention of a colonist for as long as they wanted. And again, the idea of a speedy trial, given in an amendment, the idea behind what that means as to why we're given these rights the way we are. All right, so altering the Constitution. So when we're talking about the difficulty, okay, it is very, very difficult to change the Constitution. Okay? And this is on purpose. Okay? The idea was the colonists and the founders and framers specifically felt that a simple amendment process would lead to tyranny of the majority. Okay, meaning that on a whim, that if the ability was easy for a government to change the Constitution, the idea was that it felt that it was easier to impose this governmental will from generation to generation. So again, it was on purpose that it's as short as it is. So in relation, the Constitution is very short in relation to other nations and countries around the world. And again, this is on purpose. Okay, it's very, very difficult to alter the Constitution. So why is that? So we'll specifically go through why it's so hard. So there are only two formal methods for proposing an amendment to the Constitution that are available. Okay, so when you're talking about, again, altering or adding on to the Constitution, this is why it is so difficult. Okay, so it requires, and this is just to propose an amendment. Okay, it's 2/3 vote in each chamber of Congress, or a national convention that is called by Congress at the request of 2/3 of state legislatures. So 2/3 being a 66% threshold. Okay, 66% of people, or the Chamber of Congress, has to, in order to propose the amendment. Okay, this is just proposing the amendment. To ratify that amendment, okay, and this is ratification, that threshold of 66% now goes up to 3/4, which is 75%. Okay, so this can happen by two methods: by a positive vote in 3/4 of the state legislatures of various states, and by special conventions called in states, and a positive vote in 3/4 of them. Okay, so like I said, to ratify that 66% becomes 75%, and very, very difficult to get that high of agreeing to anything. Okay, so again, when you're talking about coming to a consensus and agreement, that 3/4 threshold, unless something is very, very popular supported, so let's say the ability for many of you at your age, 18 to 21, how during the Vietnam War era, the idea was that if you are young enough to go and fight and die for your country, you should be able to vote. Okay, so again, that notion allowed the Constitution to be altered by way of the 26th Amendment. The idea that you guys now have the ability to vote because of that wide popular support based on that idea that if you're young enough to go and fight and die for your country, you should be able to vote in that country. Right? So again, that was a very widely supported idea that allowed the Constitution to be altered to add that in to the Constitution. All right. So again, after an amendment has then been approved by Congress, it still needs 3/4 of the state legislators to approve the amendment. Okay, so again, the states still have a say whether they want that amendment included in the Constitution, the national level. Okay, so again, the framers felt that a simple amendment process could lead to tyranny of the majority. Specifically, again, where our Constitution is not long, so it's very brief. However, it's very flexible. Okay, the idea that the Constitution has remained flexible for as long as it has. Since the inception of our country, 1787, specifically when our Constitution is written to include, protections, you're talking about, again, very flexible in the sense that it allows different chambers of Congress, presidents that come through in the executive branch to infuse their feelings into the system. Okay, so presidents and congressmen and women, they have the ability to be more of a states' rights kind of a president or a congressman or woman, or more of a national rights kind of a president or congressman or woman. Okay, so they have those ideas that, again, our Constitution is short, but there are enough access points that allow flexibility to exist. Okay, so we'll talk about those during the chapter, specifically how not this chapter, but I believe chapter 6, 4 or 5. I think it's 4. Yeah, it's about 4. So again, when we're talking about what these varying interpretations are, okay, so it's very flexible in the sense, like I said, it permitted great alterations in the Constitution by way of varying interpretations over time. So again, these interpretations of how the Constitution, how it was written, are then interpreted by generations. Okay, this is by way of congressional legislation, presidential actions, like I said, judicial review. Okay, so again, how courts see certain cases that go before them, custom and usage. Okay, so again, all of this allows that flexibility that's built into what the Constitution is saying. Okay. All right. So at issue. So the at issue today, specifically what your quick write is going to ask for this week specifically. So what am I asking for in the quick write? Okay, so what am I asking? So just how Christian were the founders? Okay, so this is the actual at issue within the book. Specifically speaking to, again, how Christian were the founders. And again, we talked about the colonial experience, the idea that the colony started based on religious significance, the idea that many of the colonies were started because of religious persecution. They wanted freedom from the monarchy, from King George III, that again, was mandating specific belief systems. Right? So again, when you're adding in these ideas, look at those notions. Look at how, again, the notion of belief systems very much shapes our ideas, okay, behind how we internalize things. Okay? So do yourself a favor. Speak to how the philosophers, okay, remember I told you, they are the rock stars of this era. Okay? So when we're talking about how the colonists' hearts and minds were being captivated, again, the idea was that philosophers were able to captivate that religious belief that also led to, again, why the Revolutionary War was fought the way it was. Again, that idea behind natural law, okay, being superior to human law. Again, that divine inspiration behind why the colonists, believed so hard in their cause, behind, again, these notions of the social contract, natural law, all of these things that, again, philosophers of this era, specific ones, were harping on. They were harping on to, again, captivate the hearts and minds in that religious belief system as well. Some philosophers you're going to find were believers, and some were atheists. Okay, so again, different ways in which philosophers' belief systems very much influenced their literature. How, let's say Thomas Paine's Common Sense. So feeling that it was common sense for individuals to be free from a heavy-handed government. So again, Thomas Paine in Common Sense becoming a national bestseller at the time, again, speaking to captivating the hearts and minds of the colonists. All right, so going on, so Declaration of Independence makes no reference to Christ. Oftentimes, it's endowed by their creator. You'll hear alluding to a higher being, okay? And you'll hear that throughout different documents within our governmental structure. Okay, so again, does this specifically speak to a certain belief system, or does it mean a group of belief systems? Okay, so what do I mean by that? So the Declaration of Independence makes no reference to Christ. The Constitution makes no reference to God. However, again, they are alluded to at different times. In the sense of, again, how they're written, and like I said earlier, endowed by their creator. So you have these different notions behind how these buzzwords often allude to a belief in a higher being. In your perspective, again, seeing where or how Christian were the founders, in the sense of, again, their belief systems, how they ran their specific states within how they lived. More to point, specifically, many of the founding fathers were actually Freemasons. Okay? Freemasons are a belief system and more of an Enlightenment thinking, very much coming from Europe. So again, speaking to kind of how belief systems, founding fathers, some of them were Christian, some of them were not. You're going to see that. The idea, again, how that, very much speaks to how they constructed the Constitution, why they alluded to different things, may not have said things specifically. Again, looking to deconstruct these concepts. Because like I said, in a K through 12, like I said last week, these conversations are very taboo. And you can't really talk about, God and religion and how government is. But again, when you're talking about, analyzing these historical connections behind how the colonies formed, how philosophers really captivated the minds and hearts of colonists, you're looking to, again, put that in perspective. Again, how, this analysis of our colonial history, speaks to, again, where we've been as to where we're going, all these different things that, again, look for analysis. Okay? So, more to point, did the founders intend the United States to be a quote-unquote Christian nation? Okay? So, again, that idea behind, how your analysis fits or doesn't fit that mold, again, it's always your opinion, and I will never, ever grade on opinions, how you feel about things. It's, the grammatical, the punctuation, structure, all that stuff. So again, when you're looking at analysis of this, there's no right or wrong answer. Okay? There never is. Okay? It's being able to defend how you feel or your analysis of why you believe what you believe, while incorporating an aspect of the book, PowerPoint, both of them. Again, utilizing those terms, let's say natural law, when it comes to, the analysis of philosophers or social contracts, again, alluding to those different notions that, again, speak to how colonial America developed. So scholars and school boards often differ on these issues. So oftentimes the idea is that school boards, scholars, oftentimes they struggle. Oftentimes, let's say, putting in let's say a city council or school board's chambers, in God we trust. Okay, and the idea behind having that on every one of our currencies. Okay, so the idea was, looking at that analysis, looking at, where these buzzwords of belief systems or non-belief systems kind of establish themselves. Right? And again, the notion of under God being put into our Pledge of Allegiance during the McCarthy era. Okay, so kind of trying to differentiate ourselves from the godless communists. Okay, so again, you have notions behind why certain elements of our fundamental values, democratic values that are alluded to, that again kind of get evoked into the system at different times, right? For different reasons and different purposes. Right? All right. So specifically, are there any questions, comments, concerns, issues, again, that kind of speak to maybe not understanding the question? Because again, there are no right or wrong answers. It's analyzing these aspects, like I said, of colonial history, specifically within our documents, our Declaration of Independence, our Constitution, and looking to analyze where these concepts of creator or God, or these alluded to ideas that oftentimes don't get enough dialogue as they should. Because again, seeing where our existence as a country derived from, why limited government existed, why we didn't like taxes, because again, that heavy-handed monarchy was laying on the taxes. Stamp Act, Sugar Act, everything else that existed during this time period. So again, analyzing these concepts that speak to how our country developed, why we value the fundamental values, why they exist the way they do, very much coming from, again, that colonial history, that colonial background of our country.
I have a quick question.
Any questions? Yeah, go for it.
So this is Lady asking, for the homework, not only just the quick write, but the other homework assignment? Can you...
Which one's that? The other?
Specifically about the Constitution. Well, both the quick write and then like the other homework.
So you're talking about, because this is for the chapter 2 quick write, and then if you wanted me to go over chapter 1's quick write, I can do that again. Do you need chapter 1's quick write gone over, or do you need number 2?
Hold on. One interpreter clarification.
No problem.
Yeah, so with chapter 2, quick write. That's regarding the Constitution, and so I just want to make sure I have an understanding about what specifically it's. So we're kind of doing like the same process as what we did with chapter 1.
Yeah.
But now
exactly. So analyzing these topics, these questions that again speak to, alluded to in the chapter. So like I said, kind of wanting to incorporate the philosophers where they speak to these ideas within the Constitution. Let's say how it was written, why it was written. Let's say the separation of powers, okay, the checks and balances. That was Montesquieu. So Montesquieu, he helped in terms of developing, what that meant in the Constitution. Was he a believer in God, or was he not a believer in God? Again, all of these philosophers come with belief systems as well. Some were Christian, some were rabid atheists. So again, you have different belief systems that kind of speak to how our Constitution developed, our Declaration of Independence. So all of these documents that again speak to different historical significance within colonial America.
Okay, I get that.
Okay, just making sure. And again, the ideas behind you, understanding it. There is never a right or wrong answer. It's simply just alluding to the fact that the main concepts of the chapter. So like I said, the philosophers that really, really captivated the hearts and minds, analyzing how they very much speak to how the Constitution, the Declaration of Independence was developed. So again, they all come with specific ideas as well that they've evoked into the system. So again, helping develop why our government is structured the way it is. So how we're able to again extend ourselves because of these fundamental values that are put in by thinkers of the time. Philosophers being the thinkers, they were the ones that felt the need to evoke their feelings that again spoke to, let's say, natural law being superior to human law. Again, captivating that wavelength of the Christian population. And again, feeling the idea of saying, well, hey, God wants us to be free. He wants us to be able to not experience a heavy-handed monarchy. And again, that kind of theme, captivates an individual saying, God wants us to do this. That can be dicey at times, because again, some people can justify, God telling them, something, outlandish. But again, in this constitutional expression, that's very much what came about behind the idea of what natural law is. So again, when you're seeing how these ideas came about in our country, just know that, again, there's always a philosophical idea that needs to, also be deconstructed. Any other questions? And again, that was a great question. Very good question.
I actually have a question.
Go for it.
Okay, so you said that you're never gonna grade the quick rights based off of opinion, but you said that it's based off of grammar and punctuation and stuff like that. So are you wanting us to make references back to your slides to kind of back up our point?
Again, the idea of style, I know that, like I said, I've read the book so many times that I'll know if you're referencing the book. But let's say if you want to, dovetail a point as to what I'm saying, you can always say, what was referred to during lecture, regarding this philosopher that, spoke to the Declaration of Independence. You can always do that depending on, again, how you want to answer it. Again, just, make sure it's page and a half, closer to 2 pages, again, depending on how big your heading is, your name, the date, the class, everything like that. So again, closer to 2 pages, you want to get to that substance behind, again, not wanting to curtail your creativity in the sense that, again, if you want to cite outside sources, by all means, you can always do that. So again, if let's say you want to know more about Montesquieu, or if you want to know more about John Locke, you are not, centralized just to the book. If you want to look at something else online and just want to cite it in there, make it longer, by all means.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, good question, though. Great question. Any other questions, comments, or concerns?
I had a question.
Yeah, go for it, Todd.
So you said that that when we're using any citation from the book or your PowerPoint,
from the book, yeah.
Specifically
because I'll always know it's from the book because, again, my PowerPoint always mirrors, kind of what the book is saying anyway. But then again, I also, know that, I've read the book so many times that, again, I'll know when you're making reference to it in the sense of where you are. So again, if you want to make a direct quote, you can. If you don't, that's fine too. So again, knowing that if it's something from the primary source, which is the book, you don't necessarily have to cite it. But if you're using outside sources, then you want to cite, because again, I won't know where it's coming from. So again, like Chloe said, you can use the book and, that's awesome and good and well. But again, you're not limited to that. So if you are using outside sources, just make sure you're citing.
All right, thanks.
No problem. Any other question? That was a good question as well. Good job. Any other questions, comments, concerns, or issues that I can answer specifically? And again, like I said, that first class was the longest class that we'll ever have, in the sense of, again, knowing that, everybody's night class is, very difficult. And again, I specifically make sure that, again, if you have any questions, I get back to them. If you email me, just stay on top of due dates. And again, the best way to do that is Canvas. Okay, so Canvas will always have the date when things are due. Okay, so making sure, again, that your assignments are in on time. Like I said, it'll always be on Canvas, and it'll always tell you the due date, and that will always be the due date. Okay, so again, making sure that you're aware of that, so that, again, due dates don't creep up on you. in that way. But again, we'll always have that week lag. So like I said, your first quick write isn't due for another 4 hours. Okay, so again, if you haven't done it yet, you still have that time. And you'll always have that time after lecture because of, again, that week delay, that week lag. So again, in regards to maybe adding something that maybe I said in lecture that, you want to add or make longer or, maybe clarify, you can always do that as well. Okay? So again, seeing ways in which you can respond to that, make sure that you're able to absorb a good level of not only what the book is saying, but also what is said in lecture, how you internalize the questions the way you do, and again, just being cognizant of structure, grammar, punctuation, and so forth. Any other questions? So Mr. Espinoza asks, how many pages are per quick write? So, like I said, page and a half, closer to 2 pages. Again, depending on how big your heading is at the top, your name, your date, if you're putting the whole pedigree information, again, you want to get it closer to 2 pages in that way. Times New Roman, 12-point font, making sure, again, you're not getting too creative or too fancy, trying to take up room. I've seen it all. It's substance over getting the actual page and a half. Again, you want to put information. I know, when students are putting, due diligence into their quick writes. But again, making sure that, again, closer to 2 pages in that way. Yes, so double spaced, if you want to do double spaced, depending on, again, you're not limited to 2 pages. So even last week, I was asked as well, are you just limited to 2 pages? No, if you want to go longer, go for it. But again, if you want to start out with double spaced, obviously that helps out in the sense of getting your assignment in a nice sized fashion and a timely one. Good question, Octavio. Any other questions? No? And again, you guys can always email me, making sure, again, that now everyone is in the class, making sure, again, that everyone did the introductory questions, which I saw, which was awesome. So now, again, everybody is enrolled in the course. I'm going to turn in my finalized electronically dropped roster. I just wanted to make sure, again, that everyone was here. And again, it looks like it was so. So again, making sure, again, if you ever need anything, I will always be available through email. And again, if you need a Zoom meeting, request it earlier the better. In the sense of, again, getting a date where I won't be in class, or it won't interfere with your schedule as well. But again, the best way to get a hold of me is through email. I will answer questions. The only reason I waited to class to answer the questions about the quick write is because I had like 4 or 5 of them. So I'm sure other students wanted some clarification as well. So that's why I decided to answer the questions in class rather than through email, just because, again, it would be a lot more clarity in the sense of asking or answering that question to everybody as well. Because, again, if 4 or 5 people are asking that question, you got to multiply that by 2 or 3 in the sense of, others that may be confused as well. Any other questions?
Is there a spot where I could post the link on the discussion board, or if not, could I email it to you? Because some people, I know it's easier to get on Canvas on your phones. That way you could click the link so you could directly join the group chat. So I just don't know if there's a spot where I could create a discussion board and post the link there.
You should have the ability to create a discussion board on your end on Canvas. Where the professor doesn't even realize it sometimes, in the sense of, again, how you guys structure it. I know I've had classes where, when I used to have examinations, study groups would post in the sense of, their feelings towards answers or how I would answer them. So again, how you guys, are able to kind of get your groups chats together. I will never restrict it. You should have that ability on Canvas, but I will never mandate it as like a grade or anything like that. So again, just to avoid that, confusion in that way, you guys can always establish that on your end. But again, I'll never make it mandatory.
Awesome. Perfect. Thank you so much.
Yeah, no problem. Yeah, and Alyssa, the best way to get a hold of me is through email. Any other questions, comments, concerns, issues that I can answer? And again, you're never limited to class time to email. I'll get it, emailed you back as quickly as I can, because I know, again, oftentimes being left in the dark about what a situation is or a question. Again, you guys are all enrolled in the course, so don't worry about that now, in the sense of who has access to Canvas and the assignments as well. Any other questions, comments, concerns, or issues before I let everyone go? No? All right. And again, have a great week. Have a great night. Always know that, again, health first. Keep those around you, your loved ones, in thoughts, because, again, a lot of people are going through and experiencing some devastating times right now. And again, being in a poverty-stricken area that we are, oftentimes it's a lot more people than we think. So, again, always pray for good health. Have a great one. I'll see you guys next week.
Thank you.